All right, so the moment of strategy, we've broken all of it down now. We know where we're at with, what do we need for branding, what do we need for business, what are our goals, what are our sub-goals. We know about the 5 pillars. We've gotten through the moment of truth. Now is the moment of actual strategy. And the moment of strategy is the final phase of the digital strategy process. And so, again, the digital strategy process is a process of strategizing before you begin to implement anything, right? The challenge for a lot of businesses and a lot of business owners, even a lot of marketers, is they don't bother to strategize things out before they begin to implement, right? So what happens is they begin to willy-nilly start throwing things together and hoping that it will actually work. And then if they start getting a little bit of result from that happens, they tend to do more of that, but there's still no real set strategy for overall business growth, right? And so by developing out this strategy first, then we have a good idea and understanding of which directions we need to go with specific tactics, right? And that's the real key, because the 5 pillars really represent tactics that can be used in the phases in what we'll be getting into shortly, which will be the actual customer journey, or the process of taking someone from they don't even know you exist all the way to they actively promote your business, right? And so this moment of strategy here is really, it has 2 phases, okay? The first phase is manpower. And when we think about this, what we have to think about is, what do we have and what do we need in manpower? Now, we talked a little bit about it in the moment of truth, in just the understanding and looking at before, okay, well, what do I currently have people-wise? What do I currently have tool-wise? What are my costs associated with these? And then what do we need? But there are a few questions that we need to ask ourselves still, and how we need to begin to break this down, right? So we talked about means before. When I talked about means, what did we reference? What were we talking about? Okay, so budgets is something that we look at within means. Means is realistically, it's what do you have, what are you currently doing. It's all of the means that we have in order to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish, right? And so when we look at these things, we have to look at what's called low priority means and high priority means. Now, what do you think I mean by low priority means and high priority means?
What is a higher priority? What, like money versus who gets what task, or how important is it on the scale, and where does it need to be categorized?
Okay, perfect. So the thought process here is, remember we talked about before when we talked about the money and the budget and the tools and all that you have certain things that you have invested a lot of money in. And if you have invested a lot of money in those things, then it's important to make sure that those things work, right? So that would be a high priority type of means. If you already have something that you're doing that's generating a good ROI, that would be a high priority means, right? You may have something that you're doing that is not generating a great ROI, but it is generating an ROI, right? And so you might want to keep doing it, but how do we do it, right? So what we're looking at with this phase 1 manpower is we're looking at the combinations of these types of means, right? So if the first thing we want to look at is combining a low and a high priority means, right? So again, we're talking about putting these things together now, right? And so if we have something that's a low priority means, but it has synergy with a high priority means, then can we combine these things to be able to boost results? For example, let's say that I'm doing something in my marketing that is generating a decent ROI, and I've got something else over here that may not be doing so great. Is there a way that I can combine these two things to boost results for the thing that is generating the high ROI? Okay. Practically speaking, let's say that I've got a staff member, okay, and the staff member, they're okay at their job, right? They may not be great at their job, but they're okay at their job. And I've got this system over here that we've invested a lot of money into, right? But the system itself is not being used very effectively. So could I reassign this staff member to work this system and give that person, that low priority, a focal point on the high priority to boost the effectiveness of that high priority, right? So, for us, one of the things that we do here, Larry, for example, we have one of our CRMs is Infusionsoft, right? And Infusionsoft is a very robust piece of software, okay? And it's expensive, right? Compared to other CRMs anyway. And so it runs in the hundreds of dollars a month and takes usually thousands of dollars to set up effectively and so on and so forth. Now, there's a lot of things that can be automated within that system. However, you got to have the time and the manpower to be able to do that, right? So you have a large capital expense that goes into this particular system, but if it's not being used effectively, it's useless, right? So for Larry, one of the things that I've done, because again, Larry is great with people. He really enjoys people and so on and so forth. But as far as some of the other things that we need done, he's not so great with those things. So I actually have him working in that system, setting up certain things now, and he's thoroughly enjoying it, and we're beginning to get more result out of that particular system. He's doing everything from tracking like past due payments. He actually found the other day, he was looking at our accounts receivable, and it was nearly $500,000 in accounts receivable, and so he's tracking down what's accurate, what's not accurate, and then going through all of that to determine what needs to be done in what situation, right? And so again, it's making that particular means much more effective by combining these two deals, right? And so this is, when we talk about low and high priority means together, what we're really looking at is how can we combine people and systems or tools that we have effectively to be able to boost results, right? So there's two questions I have to ask myself in that. The first is, do you have access to any low priority systems that can work together with high priority means to be able to boost results, right? So in other words, what can I synergize? The second question really becomes, do I have any people that can work together to be able to boost results, right? Oftentimes, especially for smaller businesses, the tendency is they tend to completely try to separate roles, which is fine in a lot of situations. But if I can have these people work together in certain ways, it's the value of teamwork in essence. But if we can have them work together in certain ways, then there's a lot of opportunity there to be able to boost results. It's kind of like you hear in the Bible, 3 heads are better than 2. Right? So a three-strand cord is not easily broken. And so it's that concept of synergy. The second thing we have to look at is low priority means versus offline means. Right? And I know we talk digital strategy and all that. What oftentimes we forget about is the fact that we have offline methods that we use of getting business and growing our business and so on and so forth. And so the question there is, are there any low priority means that we have that can help boost the results of our offline methods? So one of the things a lot of times people don't think about is if I have a if I have a CRM, that's one of our 5 pillars, right? If I have a CRM in place, how can I utilize that CRM in combination with my offline stuff in order to be able to boost results? And a lot of times it's simpler things than what we think about. Our mind tends to go to the overly complicated stuff, right? But if you consider this, I've got a CRM that's set up and we're doing email marketing and we're doing this and this and this. So what happens if I just decide to look through our CRM, look at high potential prospects and pick up the phone and make a phone call, right? So that's a simple example of using a combination of both our online means and our offline means, combining those things to attempt to boost results, right? It could also be looking at our best clients, for example, and saying, okay, well, with our best clients, maybe we want to actually mail birthday cards to them or mail a paper newsletter as opposed to just a traditional email newsletter, so on and so forth. The third is high priority means. High and high priority means. And so sometimes the means that we have to prioritize above all others need to be able to work together to get results, right? So there are times where we have spent a fortune on this and spent a fortune on this, or this is generating a lot of results and we've also spent a fortune on this right here, and we need to be able to combine these things together to be able to, again, boost results. So that's really our question here, is of our highest priority means, what can work together and produce even better results? And so we often see it in lacking, right? So you get somebody that's spending a lot of money on Facebook ads, for example, and they're getting some sales and they're getting some results with these Facebook ads and all that. But what they're not doing is they may not be using the email system that they have effectively to follow up and keep up with all the people who didn't buy immediately, right? And so by combining the two of those, then they have the opportunity to make that even more effective, right? Keep up with and communicate and connect with those people who aren't ready to buy right now, but not now doesn't mean never, right? All right, so the next thing that we have to look at in this is redundancies. Redundancies. Now, one of the challenges that we have to think about is how often are we doing things, right? So doing the same things multiple times is redundant, right? It can be extremely draining. It can drain funding, it can drain energy, it can drain drive, it can drain joy. It can make you want to quit. You feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. It gets repetitious, right? So when we think about redundancies, what we have to do is we have to look at what means do we have that have the capacity then to deviate from some of the redundancies, right? And so if we can get a deviation from redundancies, then that allows us to free up time to be able to focus on other high priority means, right? So in our deviation from redundancies, some of it's very simple stuff, right? Setting up email automations. Okay, so if somebody requests a contact from you on your website, then they get an email saying, "Hey, we got your request. We'll be following up with you shortly," and then integrating maybe a calendar scheduling system into that, where it says we'll be following up with you shortly. If you'd like to go ahead and schedule an appointment to discuss, then click here. Right? So that saves us from having to, if we're getting a lot of contacts through the website, it saves us from having to make all of those phone calls because some of them can be automatically scheduled, right? Things that we often think about, like sending out 4th of July emails or Happy Memorial's Day emails or Merry Christmas emails, and creating systems so that these things can be handled automatically so that we're not having to do that over and over and over again. So there are a lot of redundancies in business, right? and that's been one of my driving factors for quite some time, is how can I automate as much as possible, right? So that way I'm freed up to focus on the major things that need to happen as opposed to dealing with the day-to-day minutia, right? So automate out all of those. And so one of the things for us in looking at redundancies is often it's not just a repetition of things, it's multiple locations of things or things that do the same thing, right? And so one of the reasons why we chose Infusionsoft to use as our CRM is because Infusionsoft actually has access to a merchant account, right? And so before we had that, we actually had 5 different merchant accounts, right? And it was because the nature of what needed to happen, right? Because we had a merchant account built into QuickBooks. We had a merchant account with First Data. We had a merchant account with Forte. We had PayPal, and we had Stripe, and we had all of these things, right? And so redundant because it's a lot, right? And so by integrating all of that into our Infusionsoft account, we were able to actually shut down a chunk of those, or automate the ones that we weren't shutting down, right? So we still have a PayPal account, but we just don't process the transactions through that like we used to. We still have a Stripe account, but we actually now have the Stripe account only for one of our resources, right? And again, because that's actually set up to be automated, there's no processing for us in it, right? So everything that we were having to manually process before through multiple places, we're now only processing through 2 instead of 5, right? So shut down a bunch of redundancies. So in looking at those things, what can we get rid of? Redundancies. Priorities versus budget and time, right? That's something else that we have to look at. So if it takes too much money or too much time, priorities have to change. And so sometimes as a business, you have to focus on creating awareness, right? That's one of the goals. But if it costs too much to create awareness through marketing, then you may have to focus on something else until you can build up the revenue in order to be able to spend some of that on awareness, right? So it may be one of those things where you say, okay, well, we need to be able to budget $1,000 a month, let's say, towards awareness campaigns, but right now we can't afford necessarily to do that. We need to be budgeting the largest chunk of our money to something that's a little bit a higher priority, and budget a very small amount to the awareness. And then as that awareness begins to build over time, maybe we can begin to reallocate some of those funds, right? And so again, the question we have to ask is, am I investing in any priority that is taking too much money or too much time? One of the biggest things that we see with this is human resources. Okay, that's why it's under manpower. So it's human resources. We often see businesses that want to do it themselves versus outsourcing things, because they look at the fact that, well, I'm already paying staff, and so my staff can handle it since they're already being paid, and it would cost me more money to outsource, right? But the reality of that scenario is, if I have a much less effective staff member doing it, and I could outsource it to a much more effective company, right, then the level of effectiveness in that particular area goes up significantly, and that staff member can be reallocated to handling things that are a higher priority to be able to boost overall results. It's something that I've said to quite a few clients. Stop trying to do your own accounting, for example. Hire a bookkeeper. Have an accountant do your accounting. You're trying to run and manage QuickBooks, and you're trying to handle all of the bookkeeping and receipts and all of this kind of stuff. And it can take a lot of time. It actually drains a lot more time than what you think it does. So by the end of the month, this person has spent hours and hours and hours doing this, and they're spending even longer doing it because they don't have that degree of expertise, right? Someone else could do it. Yes, it would cost you a little bit more money, but if you can free up that person for areas of higher priority and higher need, then you generate a better result overall, right? So priorities versus budget and time. And then we have to look at competence and low priority. All right? Competence and low priority means. So if a person is competent enough at something to where it takes up very little of their time, then we have the opportunity then to be able to fill the balance of their unused time with things that can help give a better result, right? Kind of goes back to that, something I was talking to Shay about the other day is, you know, one of the doctors had said something about one of her staff members, and you know, he said he'd come up there and she was sitting at the desk and she wasn't doing anything, and you know, she wasn't all that busy and everything else, and that it didn't look good because she was just sitting there doing nothing, right? And you know, we were talking about that, and she said, you know, what he doesn't get is she had already completed all her tasks that were necessary to do at that particular point, right? And so this is something that actually happens often in business, right? People end up with downtime, right? Because they're done with whatever they're working on. And so then the question is can we give them additional tasks or additional resources or additional responsibilities that will help boost our overall results and free up some of that downtime? So the question we have to look at is, do we have anyone that's greatly exceeding their job tasks? Right? The reason why we're looking at all of this is because what we need to develop is what we call an omnichannel marketing strategy. An omnichannel marketing strategy, right? And so an omnichannel just means multiple channel. The marketing strategy is going to be started best when we begin to map out our customers' buyer journey, right? And so again, just a 30,000-foot overview of this, we have to understand that there are 4 main types of customers, right? 4 main types of customers. There are those people who are reactive and buy out of impulse. There are the proactive people who are actively looking for solutions. They're looking for something specific. There are new customers that so far have really resisted buying products or services. And then there are old customers that have bought in the past, right? So 4 types of customers. And so when we begin to determine the types of customers, what we have, what we're at, what our needs are, so on and so forth, then the next step in that is to begin to look at the stages of buying, right? So I'll talk about the stages of buying, but there's a correlation between stages of buying and the actual customer journey, though they're not exactly the same. Okay? Stages of buying realistically concern more with, this is a person from a consumer's perspective, what are the stages that they go through in order to buy something. The customer journey is more from a company's perspective, what do we have to do in order to get them through these stages, right? And so in a buyer's journey, buyer stages, there's 7 stages, right? The first stage is identifying needs. And again, identifying needs just says, you know what I need, right? You know what I've been thinking about? And we do this all the time. Even something as simple as, you know what, we're out of milk. We need to get some milk. Right? That's identifying a need. The second stage after identifying needs is product search. Or we could call it service search, depending on what the need is. The third stage is informing. Right? So the informing stage is, okay, well, what do I need to know about this before I buy it? The fourth stage is attracting. The attracting stage is more, what do I like about this? What do I not like about this? Why am I attracted to it? The fifth stage is activating, which is making a purchase. The sixth stage is reactivating, which would be additional purchases. And the seventh stage is customer satisfaction. Okay? The customer satisfaction stage really is the determinant factor if a person will keep buying from you or if they will go somewhere else. So when we're designing marketing strategies and all of this digital strategy stuff, we have to look at what are the business's needs, but also then how do people buy your goods or services. Yes, the process that we have to look at in strategizing is looking at what are your business needs, what do we need to do to fulfill those business needs, but we also have to take into consideration how do people buy your goods or services. All of this, by the way, is phase 1 of strategy. It sounds like a lot, but it really doesn't take that much time. It's more internal. It's mostly internal questioning. Okay. The second phase is machine power. Right. So first phase was manpower. The second phase is machine power. Machine power very simply means running analyses of how the different combinations of your means will affect your goals. Running analyses to test how the different combinations will affect your goals. Okay? In marketing, oftentimes we call it A/B testing. But it's an analysis of, okay, if I do this, then if I put this and this together, then what's going to happen, right? If I were to change from doing my own internal accounting to doing external accounting and have the person that's been doing the internal accounting focusing more on the actual marketing and sales of the business, what would that look like, right? So by doing that machine power, the analysis of combinations, it's simply asking, what would it look like? And then when you implement, how well is it working? Okay? In other words, track everything. The better you can track it, the better you can understand it, the better you can understand what needs to be changed or not, and the better results effectively you're going to get from everything. Now, one of the things that we learn that, analysis, oftentimes we'll hear it in analytics, right? You hear analytics. Sometimes coaches, consultants, those kind of things will ask, what are your KPIs, right? So what are my key performance indicators that tell me whether something is working or it's not working, right? And so I also want to track how well things are working and how well they're not working and be able to determine. The key with this goes back to something that we talked about before, though. It's a matter of making sure you know who you have and what tools you have access to, and looking at what's the best possible combinations of these things, right? And sometimes people will say, well, yeah, but there's only one of me in my business. It's me and all my tools. Okay. What other vendors and suppliers do you have? What other places do you get from stuff? What other help and resources do you have for those kind of things? I know, like for us, for example, a service that I pay for on a monthly basis in our marketing business is a tech support service, right? Not that we don't know what we're doing, and not that we realistically need tech support, but what I found that the cost of that tech support was way cheaper than the cost of our time dealing with it. They can handle it faster than we can, so it frees us up to be able to work on a lot of more important things as opposed to dealing with the menial things, right? Why is this not working? Why is this broken? And I'll give you a prime example. So, had a client the other day that rebuilt their website on a new host. They wanted to keep the old host because their email was hosted there, and so they wanted to keep that old host. And so when we repointed the domain name at the new host, their email stopped working completely. Now, this is one of those things that they tried for 2 days to figure out. Right? Freaking out because it's an actual resort, and so freaking out for 2 days about why this is not working, what's happening, and it's not within our scope to fix that because we dealt with the web stuff and what we did on our end was correct. The problem was that whoever had actually set up their email service originally had pointed, instead of the IP address of the server that maintained the emails, they pointed it at the domain name. So whenever you repoint the domain name at a new server, now all of your emails it's looking for all of your emails on the new server because the email was pointed at the wrong place, right? So change the pointing and move on, right? Easy peasy stuff. They tried for 2 days to figure that out, when very simply all they had to do was call and say, hey, email's not working. Do you guys know what the problem is, and do you know how to fix it? It literally took 5 minutes looking at it and saying, okay, this is what the problem is. We'll redo this for you and get it fixed, and it'll be active and live, and it takes a little while to propagate. So about 4 hours, you'll have email access again, right? It actually only took about 10 minutes. For them waiting, their wait time, right? Kind of goes back to an old story that I heard. Guy has a machine shop, and and he has a machine that goes down, and they're kicking the machine and they're hitting the machine, and they can't figure out why the stupid machine's not working, and this, that, and the other, and so they end up calling an electrician. The electrician comes in, takes about 30 seconds, walks around the machine, reaches down, comes back about 30 seconds later and says, okay, it's fixed. Here's a bill, it's $1,000. And the guy said, well, what did you have to do? He said, well, it was unplugged. I just plugged it back in, right? He said, well, if all you did was plug it in, why is it $1,000? I shouldn't be paying $1,000 for you to plug something in. He said, well, you're not. He said, you're paying $50 for me to plug it back in. The other $950 is for my analysis of what was wrong and the expertise of knowing what to do to get it back working, right? Okay, so same general concept, right? So just that whole thought process in that, a lot of times we look at that as a negative in business, but The positive of it is we oftentimes think of things that are a lot more complicated than what they really are. So sometimes if we need to start looking at the simplest of solutions to be able to get those things fixed. Unfortunately, often we don't have the expertise to be able to focus on the simplest of solutions, and that's why outsourcing things, if it takes a lot of time, is more effective than trying to do it ourselves. Make sense? All right. So now once we have all this done, we have our entire digital strategy. We know what we need, we know what we have, we know what's going to work best together, and we can begin implementing all of that together. The next step will be looking at the actual customer journey from a business perspective.